Wuthering Waves already has plenty of tier lists online detailing what characters are strong in the meta, but I wanted to make a video more focused on new and mid-game players showing what characters I believe are worth pulling for their accounts. There are plenty of S-tier DPSs and supports according to Qiuyuan, but I don't think that means that they're necessarily equal in pull value just because they're in the same tier. For example, I generally believe that universal supports are more important than DPSs since they can fit on more teams and have more flexibility. I also think that new players should focus on building up a full team first rather than Frankensteining a bunch of characters together. Now, it is worth noting that all the game's endgame modes do require multiple teams, so you make your own judgment call on pulling characters that you plan to build in the future, even if they don't necessarily fit on your roster currently. And one last thing, I'm focusing more on recent 5 stars or 5 stars that are the best in their respective niches. I will speedrun any 5 stars I don't comment on at the end of the video. Mornye is easily one of the highest value pulls in the meta right now. Even though she's a healer, she gives huge universal damage buffs and liberation buffs. She will most certainly serve as the core healer for any 3.x DPSs because she can proc more buffs if someone can proc Toon Break on the team. She has great synergy with Lynae because Lynae can proc Toon Break, which gives access to Mornye's full array of buffs. On the other hand, you can also use her in mono fusion teams alongside Lupa. Finally, you don't really need her signature weapon. It honestly isn't that great, and if you can get the 4-star weapon Discord from pulling, it's good enough. However, there is a catch. Because she's reliant on Toon Break to proc her full buffs, she isn't fully utilized in older teams without Lynae, making her reliant on Lynae or any future characters that can proc Toon Break. This can be alleviated by pulling for her S1, which allows her to proc Toon Break on her own, but I personally think it's better to just have both her and Shorekeeper. And if you plan to pull for any future 3.x units, then her S1 isn't really needed. I would definitely recommend her for new players. Lynae is probably the best universal buffer in the game right now, while also being both flexible and F2P friendly. She gives all type damage amplification, liberation damage amplification, Toon Break, and also a generic attack percent and all damage type bonus amplification with her Echo set. Her signature pistols are good at boosting both her own damage and also her teammates' damage, but it's honestly not necessary at all. She enables Mornye to be used on any single team, but it's not the other way around. Lynae is completely competent on her own without any new units. She will most likely be future-proof considering she was just released, and she will probably have synergy with the future Toon characters. If it wasn't clear already, I think she's an amazing pull value for any new players. Shorekeeper is easily one of the most versatile characters in the game right now. Any character that benefits from crit rate and crit damage likes her buffs, plus she's also a healer on top of all of that. Although she's currently only best in slot on 1 out of 5 of the top teams, she's still amazingly flexible and can still fill any missing spots in the team. Now you really do want a weapon that gives Concerto, and only her signature and variation do that, which are both Quattro weapons. Either way, she's still the best universal healer in the game right now, but Mornye does kinda outclass her at S1, but it's very, very close. Now maybe I am being a bit too Honkai Impact pilled, but I am a little bit scared of her getting power crept. It seems like Kuro has been thinking more specialized healers such as Cantarella, Chisa, Arrow Rover, and Mornye. These characters seem to all fill specific niches better than Shorekeeper, and it feels like Kuro's way of phasing her out. Nonetheless, due to her role as still being the best healer in the game, as well as the need for multiple teams, I still think she's an amazing pull value. Next there's Verina. She's basically just a discount Shorekeeper. Anywhere you need to flex a unit in, you can just put Verina there as a placeholder. She gives both attack and damage amplification buffs to the team while also being a healer. Please do choose her from your center selector, she is very good. Augusta is the strongest Electro DPS in the game, as well as just one of the best DPSs in the game in general. Furthermore, she's actually pretty F2P friendly because Mortefi, a 4-star, is actually her second best support behind Iuno. Even if you had other 5 stars, you could form a team with her using Mortefi and Verina. Her signature is pretty good if you can get it, but it's not mandatory. She's probably the most F2P friendly DPS to pick up. But DPSs are usually the first to get power crept, so I'd only consider her a great pull. Iuno is a pretty flexible character who can function as a main DPS or a support. She's currently Augusta's best in slot support, as well as the second strongest arrow DPS. However, there's a few caveats to point out. She grants heavy attack damage amplification, which is really only good for Augusta and Qiuyuan. Furthermore, she really isn't that big of an upgrade over Mortefi without her signature weapon. She's more of a luxury pull to be honest, but since she can function as both a support for Augusta and a DPS, I'll tentatively put her in a strong pull. Galbrena is currently the best fusion DPS in the game. She's easy to play and has 2 team comps she can swap into, either Mono Fusion or an Echo Damage comp. Thankfully, her F2P guns are also very close in performance to her signature, and she's very competitive with the top DPSs. Although she'd really like her premium teammates, being Lupa or Qiuyuan, you could use Mortefi with her to make an F2P team. However, I am reluctant to recommend Galbrena because Aemeath, a new character coming out in 3.1, is going to be a fusion DPS, and it's looking very likely that she'll be the next best DPS. Normally I'd put her at a strong pull, but due to Aemeath's upcoming release, I think Galbrena falls just short for new players. Cartethyia is the current best arrow DPS, as well as just the best DPS in the game currently. However, she comes with a bunch of caveats. First of all, she is completely reliant on Ciaccona. Without her, Cartethyia's damage falls off a lot. Second, she also really wants Sequence 2 Arrow Rover or Chisa as her healer. Although Arrow Rover is free, you will have to progress quite a bit through the story to unlock him. Finally, her signature weapon is actually quite a noticeable upgrade. I wouldn't say it's mandatory, but it's just nice to have. If you can assemble all these pieces, then she does become the highest damage output DPS in the game. However, she does struggle in AoE scenarios, which makes her a bit worse than other top tier DPSs in Wuthering Wastes. So basically, I wouldn't really pull for her unless you plan to all in on her. But I'll be honest, I do think there's better ways to spend your crystals. Even if she is the best DPS currently, other teams have basically reached 97% of her power level. I think it only makes sense to talk about Ciaccona next since she is Cartethyia's best support. Ciaccona is an arrow-specific support, but she's honestly more known for supporting Cartethyia. She can also support Iuno and Qiuyuan, but Iuno prefers Lynae over her. Her signature guns are also really good since it provides arrow resistance shred. She's also capable of providing spectral phasal, which makes her an alternative support for Zani. To be honest though, she's really only worth pulling if you have Cartethyia. Now, if you are struggling to pull everyone you like and plan to top up, why not consider using today's sponsor, topuplive.com. Top Up Live lets you top up on popular games like Wuthering Waves, Genshin Impact, and Honkai Star Rail at a huge discount. Most purchases are also non-invasive and only require your UID and the server you're in. Make sure to use my discount code BOW for 12% off or click the link in the description below. You can then check out using secure payment methods such as Google Pay, Apple Pay, or PayPal. Thank you to Top Up Live for the sponsor. Chisa's in a really awkward spot right now. She's specifically a negative status support, so she can only support Cartethyia and Zani teams. But she isn't even best in slot for Zani teams, and she isn't best in slot in Cartethyia teams either unless she has her signature weapon. She does have future potential because no teams can currently fully utilize her kit. However, I always advise players to be careful about pulling based on feature speculation, so I'd only pull Chisa if you actually want her. Lupa is currently the best mono fusion support in the game and also forms a strong fusion core with Mornye. She's also the best in slot support for Galbrena alongside Mornye. And each fusion DPS appreciates her buffs, and there's been some speculation that she could be used as an alternative team with Aemeath. She doesn't really need her signature weapon, but it does give more fusion damage bonus to her teams. However, I do feel that her meta value is strongly tied to Galbrena. Once Aemeath comes out and probably takes a spot as the best fusion DPS in the game, Aemeath would probably rather have Lynae than Lupa.
Despite being the best mono-fusion support right now, I fear fusion teams in general will evolve without her with the release of Aemeath.
Phrolova is, objectively, the best girl in the game. She is also the best general DPS in the game, in my opinion, since she is top tier in both Tower of Adversity and Wuthering Wastes. However, like Cartethyia, she really wants a lot of investment to shine. At the very least, you really want her signature weapon, and you can use her in an F2P team with Havoc, Rover, and Dungeon. But ideally, you want both her signature weapon and Cantarella to really feel top tier. I think I'd probably put her in the same tier as Cartethyia, needing high investment to really shine.
Good job, dude.
Thanks, Bao. Let's make out.
Cantarella is by far the best in slot support for Phrolova thanks to her Havoc buffing capabilities as well as her echo damage, but she can also be used as a generic support on other teams. She surprisingly also fills many roles since she has decent personal damage, provides buffs, and is a healer. But her huge reliance on energy regen and decently long rotation makes her really only best for Phrolova. Just like Ciaccona, you should really only consider pulling for her for Phrolova. So I consider Cantarella a single-use 5-star to be honest. Qiuyuan specializes in echo damage buffing and he also has pretty quick rotations. Unfortunately though, he's pretty poor as a general buffer and you'll only see him as a 3rd slot on Phrolova teams or Galbrena's 2nd best team. The issue is that he's actually pretty replaceable to be honest. Galbrena's best team uses Lupa while Phrolova can use Rocha, Shorekeeper, or Dungeon in place of him without any significant DPS loss. He also has pretty low personal damage so he can't really function as a main DPS hybrid the same way Iuno can. Due to the fact that he's pretty replaceable, I think he's only worth pulling if you actually want him. Zani is the best spectral DPS in the game. She also has an extremely high skill ceiling, so if you're willing to learn her combos, she's actually very competitive. However, she does come with a lot of caveats. She's completely reliant on Phoebe for spectral phasal, and honestly really wants her signature weapon too. The same also applies to Phoebe. At this point, she's really just a dedicated Zani support. You could technically use her as a DPS, but it actually isn't that great anymore. Both of these characters require a lot of investment, but it can pay off. I really hesitated between putting these two in either high investment category or pull them if you want category. I do think that Zani is competitive in the right hands, but I think for new players, it just isn't worth the effort unless you really like her and Phoebe. Carlotta is the current best glacial main DPS in the game. She has a really short but high damage combo and is both very easy to play and also relatively F2P friendly. She does struggle in AoE situations because the Liberation mostly does single target damage. She also doesn't get a lot of on-screen playtime due to how long it takes to refresh her cooldowns. Unfortunately at this point she also really isn't competitive with the top tiers anymore either. Carlotta's long past her prime but still a good DPS. Brant is a fusion healer sub DPS hybrid. even though he fills many roles, he's unfortunately been mostly power kept by Mornye plus Lupa. He does have a really nice quick swap comp with Lupa if you're able to learn his rotations, but he has some huge caveats. First of all, he requires a ton of energy regeneration, and he also really wants a signature weapon. He's an expensive unit that requires a lot of investment for unfortunately not much return. So yeah, only pull him if you like him. Okay, so I went ahead and put out most of the tier list. Essentially, anyone that I didn't list was basically just in pull if you want them. And then all the standard characters were in literally free. Please do not ever spend your Astrites on free, the standard characters. Essentially, preemptively, I'm thinking that Aemeath will be broken. A lot of the quote-unquote speculation has kind of shown that her damage potential is probably going to be the greatest in the game ever seen, as long as you have her core teammates, which is going to be Lynae and Mornye probably. There is some possible whispers that she can be used with Chisa, but it doesn't look too promising, to be honest. I want to explain myself with a little bit of these pulls. First of all, Lupa being in strong pull, I think, well, I know I made this assumption that she'd probably be like an alternative teammate for Aemeath, but unfortunately it's looking more and more likely that she's going to be a pretty big damage drop off from Lynae. So honestly, if like you guys want to move her down to like just pull if you want them alongside Galbrena, which is like, you know, her best teammate currently, you could. I wouldn't argue with you. Next, I think some people are going to be pretty astonished by, you know, the Zani Phoebe down here and like Galbrena down here instead of like being up here or maybe even here. And the reason why is simply just because, well, Galbrena is because Aemeath is coming out. I think it'd be wrong of me to recommend like the second best fusion DPS to a beginner when the best fusion DPS and the best DPS in general is probably going to come out soon. With Zani and Phoebe, I do think that their damage is very competitive if you can fully invest your time into learning all their combos as well as getting good, you know, gear on them. But I think that it just takes a lot less like effort, and like there's just a lower barrier to entry for like these characters, like everything above from here to here, right? And then for anyone else that I put in here, they were essentially just sub-optimal picks. I'll just be honest. There'd be no reason for me to recommend like Yinlin when like Lynae exists and does everything Yinlin does, but better with, you know, with like more flexibility as well. Or like there's no reason for me to recommend Qiuyuan really when Iuno exists, because Iuno is just a better arrow DPS right now. And that's kind of my mentality with recommending a lot of these characters. If you guys skipped here just to see the list, I recommend you guys really go back and watch my explanation, because there's so much more nuance than just putting a character in a category. But yeah, I'm sorry for rambling so much. This part's really like unscripted. I just wanted to get my thoughts out there, because I know someone's gonna get mad at me in the comments, and I want to explain myself a little bit. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate you guys watching my videos. Leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.